You're listening to episode 148, Katy's Story, a daughter with scars and a story. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I'm so glad you're here today. I so enjoyed my conversation. Well, I enjoy all of these conversations. This is my most favorite part of every week is podcasting and getting to know some amazing families. But I got to know Katy because she sent me a book that she wrote, and it's a children's book, and it was one of those situations where a lot like the families and parents you hear on this podcast is they were looking for a specific resource that they couldn't find, and they developed it themselves, and they did an awesome job, and Katy's story is no different. So we're going to talk a little bit about her book, My Scars, My Brave Adventure, at the end. But spoiler alert, you can find it on Amazon and katygreenauthor.com. That's Katy. So anyway, you're just going to love it. Okay, so Katy offers so much good wisdom and nuggets of information and quotes. I could just literally, every time she said something, I just wanted to capture it in my brain. But it brought back a lot of the same themes that I hear from parents on this podcast all the time. And one of them is that you get to develop this level of compassion and empathy when you become a medical parent. And it's not necessarily one of the things that, is in your 10-year trajectory that you're like, I'm going to have this or I'm going to develop this, but it just kind of naturally develops. And I think that comes through a lot in Katy's interview. And one of the other things we really didn't get to touch on a lot that I do want to mention and have other parents and professionals look for is that when families are Googling, they're often told, don't Google, you're going to find this or that, and it's going to maybe be the opposite of what the doctor tells you. One of the things she ended up finding when she was doing one of those late night by the NICU Google searches was an expert in her child's very rare diagnosis. Providers can be very quick to say, don't Google, don't look it up. But instead of saying that, let's change the narrative to be cautious of what you find, clarify what you do find on the internet, bring it to our next meeting so that we can talk together and we can talk about what misconceptions this article may have or what you're thinking about this or what I know from my experience. And maybe change it to see who you can find that has an expertise in this. And maybe I have a connection to them and I can help you with it. So anyway, just a nugget to take from Katy's experience today. And we also, last but not least, do talk about the information sharing and that parents in 2022 are having to constantly make how much do I share? How many pictures do I share? My child's going to see or hear this later on. And so we have a discussion about that too. Anyway, let's get started with Katy's conversation. And I'm so glad you're here today. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners.
My name's Katy Green. I live with my husband Scott in Chicago in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, and we have three kids. Our oldest is Henry. He's 8, almost 9. Actually, by the time this airs, he'll be 9. and we have Lyle, who is 6, and then our daughter Charlotte, who is 4.
Okay, gotcha. I'm not going to lie. Some of my favorite episodes have been with families from the Chicago area. So there's something,
Oh,
I
funny.
just have had just such great, I have always great conversations, I have to say, but I love Chicago families. And I think there's just something about the Midwest city combination that makes y'all some of the best people. So, um, talk to us a little bit
Yeah.
about kind of the beginning stages. And I think right off the bat, you and I just had a pretty frank conversation, just kind of about what you want to share and what you don't want to share. And I don't know if you're open to talking about that because being in a podcast space with parents who are sharing information about their families can often reveal a lot of information. And you and I have talked about is that it's just solely up to the direction of the family and what they believe is best and what the intentions are. I don't know. What do you think about everything?
Yeah, I think what I had shared with you is that it's constantly a balance of trying to figure out. We want Charlotte's diagnosis and her medical complexities to be something that we talk about as a family and we share with friends. But we also, she's only 4 right now. And as she gets older, we are really aware that she's going to be a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, and she's going to look herself up and see some of the conversations that we've had. So we're kind of always trying to balance, as I'm sure a lot of fellow parents of children with medical complexities can relate to this. It's kind of always how much do we share and with who? And part of the reason that we do share is because we really strongly believe that it's not a secret. It's part of who we are. But also, we want to be able to help other people and give
Yeah.
back the way that people have done for us through this process. So that's kind of the frame of reference of where we're coming from as we
Yeah,
talk here.
and I think as I mentioned to you too, like that balance is something that every family in 2022 is navigating. How much do we share online? How much information do we give? Like we want to share with family, and I think when it comes to this podcast, our goal is that through sure a child's healthcare journey, the parents are also having these really unique experiences that are worth, and if you want to share and to listen, because we're not really getting into the nitty gritty of the medical stuff, but how you felt when your child was diagnosed with something that you weren't expecting and how you handled that stress. And that's really what we hope listeners come back to for this is, sure, it's nice when you can talk to another parent like, yes, we tried XYZ drug and it worked this way or that way, but really like we're here to listen to you, Katy, and that your experience is important, and that you have value to add to other families who are starting to walk this path.
Yeah, well, I hope so. You hope that there's something that you can add to the conversation that might help someone in some small way. And is something I thought about when you were talking is it's really one of your first instincts is to go find another family or other people with the exact same diagnosis that are going through the exact same thing as you, which can be extremely helpful. But also sometimes I find that it's helpful to talk to people who maybe are experiencing similar difficulties, but maybe a different diagnosis. And so you're not always playing that like, well, this worked for them, but it might work for my daughter, because it really is a spectrum, even within a diagnosis, and every child is different. So sometimes I also even find that it's helpful to talk to people within the medical arena that have a completely different diagnosis, and it brings some good, varied
For sure.
perspective.
Oh, I think that's such a good point too. Yeah. And I think what's actually probably more common than the medical paths that families are walking are the shared experiences, feelings, and emotions that you carry with you. And that probably, you can get that whether we're talking about cancer or a heart defect or a food allergy or diabetes, whatever it is, like we're still in this like kind of human existence walking alongside each other. So I just think it's such a good conversation to have, and I appreciate you bringing it up today. So with that said, we're going to stay away from the actual diagnosis, but we are going to talk about, kind of what it has been like for you guys. So do you want to kind of start just by sharing what led you to the point of finding out that something was going on?
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting conversation in itself. Excuse me, because I think you do have kind of two sets of parents in this world, right? Parents who knew about a diagnosis or possible complications in utero before a baby was born. But in our case, it was a complete surprise. So I think that the both experiences are equally terrible, but just very different.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Right?
It's all real just shit. There's like, whether you find out at 20 weeks or when you're pregnant, or it's a complete surprise, it's all very traumatic.
So for us, it is very traumatic. So for us, it was my third pregnancy, so it just seemed very run of the mill. And it's almost like you're so busy chasing your older two kids that you don't think about the pregnancy as much. But they were monitoring me for a 2-vessel cord, and so they were doing some extra ultrasounds. It was pretty common. They didn't really expect that it would be a problem. But because of that, they were doing a 32-week ultrasound. And I had my middle son, Lyle, with me, and we went in for the ultrasound, and my doctor came in with a look on her face I had not seen in all of my ultrasounds with her before. And we never found out the gender of any of our kids. And she said, I'm going to have to tell you the gender of the baby. And she said, it's a girl, which was so exciting in itself after having had 2 boys. I was like, very exciting to hear. But she said, we think that there might be some cyst fluid on her ovaries and also some heart abnormalities. So we need you to come in tomorrow to see MFM and do some additional screening to find out what was going on. So I had my middle son with me. I went to pick up my younger son. My husband was out of town. So kind of that initial scramble to get everybody home. We still had no idea what we were talking about at this point, but just that we had to do some additional testing. So that was a Thursday morning around 9 o'clock. Friday morning around 9 o'clock, we go in for the additional screenings and ultrasounds, and they just couldn't figure out what exactly they were looking at. Lots of screening. So they decided they were going to admit me to the women's hospital and just monitor me. It was like, you might be here a night, you might be here a week,
Gosh.
you might be here until baby's born. We just don't
And how
really
pregnant
know.
were you at this
There's
time?
a lot
What
of unknowns.
gestation were you?
32, yeah,
Okay.
32
Okay.
weeks.
I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes right now. And it's like, no, we have 2 months,
Right. I'm like, so this is April and her due date was June. So I'm like, wait a minute, this is a summer baby.
Exactly.
What do you mean? And so they did admit me and hooked me up to a heart rate monitor. And while I was hooked up, her heart rate started dropping and it wasn't coming back up. So they decided that baby had to come out right away. And around 9 p.m., they took me in for an emergency C-section. So it was about a 36-hour ordeal, all in. I mean, Thursday morning to Friday night, everything was fine. And then all of a sudden we had a baby that was born and whisked away immediately to the NICU. And it really wasn't until the following morning, that Saturday morning, where a pediatric surgeon from the Children's Hospital sat at the bottom of my hospital bed and told me that they found a bunch of anomalies in Charlotte, is my daughter's name, her colorectal, her urological system, and then she had a tethered spinal cord and a heart defect. So it's a lot to take in. And I mentioned the difference between having time to process it before baby's born versus the expedited version that I just told. And I think part of what happens when it is so fast and unknown like that is you just have no idea what they're
Right.
talking about. So it's almost like in that moment, ignorance was bliss. Like, I just don't think I fully understood how
Yeah.
sick she was or how much was going to be involved in that
Oh my
moment.
goodness. Yeah. And you have to wonder too, just like your hormones that are racing and play such a part in the way that we're processing information and emotions. And you just went through surgery. And, we talk a lot to moms who kind of have this emergent C section, baby thrown in the NICU. The most important information you're ever getting is given to you. And you're like, you don't even know how to begin to process it. What do you remember about
Yeah.
him being at the end of your bed? Like, do you even remember what he said or how you felt?
Yeah, well, I remember we had an amazing pediatric female surgeon. And so she walked in, and I'm pumping, of
Yes.
course, having just had a baby. And so that was automatically kind of
Yeah.
uncomfortable. But she was like, I'm a mom. It's okay. I got it. And had sat down at the end of my bed, and she had a handout for the diagnosis that had it's like a quick fact
Okay.
sheet, almost like Cliff Notes for a diagnosis. And then took out a pen and started drawing pictures of Charlotte's anatomy and kind of where the complications were. And I still feel this way when I get medical information now. I feel like in the moment, you kind of go numb, and you've got this doctor who's very impressive and assertive and intelligent and talented. So you're automatically intimidated off the bat. And then they start using vocabulary that you might not understand. So I think I've gotten better at it, but you kind of go numb. And then as soon as they walk out of the room, you process it and you think of 12
Mm,
questions that you should have asked. But as she was sitting on the bottom of my bed, you really are. You're just numb and you're overwhelmed, and you don't even know how to process it. Or I should say,
yeah.
I didn't know how to process it. And it's almost like in that moment, you understand that it's serious, but you don't fully grasp exactly what it's going to entail or what it all means until you have a little bit of time to digest
Yeah.
it.
I think that's a good word for it is numb. It's like that fight or flight response, right? And it's when you're in that position,
Yeah,
it's probably more likely to be the flight and just kind of zone out.
yeah, no, absolutely, definitely.
As you're talking about it too, it's like, when the doctor's sitting there and it's like you kind of actually understand what they're saying when they're saying it because they're so well spoken and educated, and you're like, okay, then okay, well that makes sense. And then they leave and you're like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's almost an outer body experience. I know that's cliche and people
Yeah,
use that,
it
but
is.
it really is that feeling. And it's almost you can see yourself
Mm,
watching the entire situation unfold. Um, yeah, and it's, something else that I keep thinking about in this situation is I think of my husband a lot in this situation and how all of this unfolded for him because he's so worried about his newborn daughter, but he also is worried about
yeah.
me, like just having had a C-section. And I'll never forget that look on his face when the doctors asked, do you want to go with baby to the NICU or do you want to stay with mom? Like, what an
Yeah.
impossible choice, right? For
Right.
dads or partners.
I just
Yeah.
interviewed
Yeah.
a NICU dad, a couple weeks ago. So it'll be out, I think, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before your episode. And he talks so much about that
Good.
question. Like, how do you choose? Like, there's
Yeah.
no right and there's no wrong. And that choice that you make forever lives with you.
Yeah, well, it's funny as we're talking about this too, so much of it is a
Yeah.
blur, right? I mean, and when I was thinking about some of the things to talk about for this, it's 4 years ago now, and so much of it is truly cloudy. But then there are specific moments or snapshots throughout the time frame that are so clear, like it could have happened
Yeah.
yesterday. And that's
Mm.
one of them where, like, in seeing his face when they asked him that question, her sitting at the bottom of my bed drawing that picture. I don't even remember what the sheet said or what the picture looked like, but it's like I remember that pen and paper so
Right.
specifically. So it's funny how trauma will do that, right? Like it's all such a blur, but then there are just certain things that are crystal clear in your memory.
Tell me,
And it may not even be the important
Oh,
stuff. I don't
it
know.
probably, I don't, from my own
It's not,
experiences, like, just I was in the hospital with meningitis, and one of my most clearest memories is like my brother and dad coming to visit me, and they brought like burgers to eat in my room, and the smell of burgers, like, is one of the first things when it makes me think about that experience when you've gone through something. It's crazy what you remember and what sticks with you.
yes,
Tell us a
it
little bit
is.
about going to see Charlotte in the NICU and what that was like for you.
Yeah. So we are really fortunate, and I have since learned that not all hospitals and women's hospitals and children's hospitals are set up this way, but it's all on one site. So I was really able to see her as soon as my anesthesia wore off from the C-section. So, we actually, if you'll indulge me, this is a pretty funny story.
Always. Please go
I think
ahead.
listeners might appreciate. Okay. So we woke up the morning after Charlotte was born, and it was an emergency. So we had no idea that I was going to be in the hospital. So I didn't have that like lovely hospital bag or anything. And as I'm going into the C-section, they're like, you need to take off all of your jewelry. And they gave me one of those hospital hazard bags. So I put all of my jewelry in that. And so I'm getting up the next morning. I was going to take a shower, and then we were going to go over and see Charlotte in the NICU. And my husband was like, "Oh, here's your jewelry," and he put it on my breakfast tray. Went to the bathroom, came back out, and my
No.
breakfast tray had been removed by
Oh,
housekeeping, and my wedding ring and my engagement ring
oh.
are in the trash at Prentice Women's Hospital in Chicago somewhere. And they were like, I mean, the nurses were so kind. They were like, "We will go look for it." And we were like, they were like, "We will dig through trash." They're like, "Do you want to file a police?" I was like, "No, it was truly an accident. It looked like trash. It was a biohazard bag on a finished breakfast tray." I'm like, but it was just, even in that moment, I remember, again, one of those specific memories that you have. I was like, I can't deal with this right now. I just want to go
I
meet my
mean,
daughter.
of all the things to
So,
happen, just like right before one of the biggest moments. Oh my gosh. So wait, you have to fill us in. What happened? Did you get it back?
no, so we didn't. So my husband did go down. They have those conveyor belts where they send the
No.
trays into the dumpsters. And he went down and took one look and was like, "We're not going to find it."
Oh
And just
no.
was like, "We're not." So it's gone. I know. It's like such a funny story just to add into the chaos
Oh,
of those first few
okay. I
days.
have one more follow-up question. Did they reimburse you for it?
No. And do you want to know the clincher? I had just, maybe a couple
Yeah.
months ago, I was like, "Why are we still paying for insurance on this wedding ring? I am not going to lose it.
Oh
It's
no.
been like 8 years." So
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Oh, but you had
Oh
insurance, right?"
no,
I'm like,
Katie.
"Nope, I didn't." So, but it does end
Oh.
well. So she was born in April. Our wedding anniversary was in August, and my husband had a diamond that was his grandmother's, that his dad had in a safe deposit box. And it was also, funny enough, a replacement ring for her. She had lost it, and her husband bought her a new
Oh.
one. So I have that now, which is incredibly.
Oh my gosh, that literally just gave me chills. That is crazy. Well, and April is significant because that is the
Oh
diamond
my
month.
gosh, I did not even think of that. You are completely right. Um, so,
Oh my
a
goodness.
fun anecdotal story to when I was getting ready to go meet Charlotte for the first time.
It's it's such a it's such an what's the word I'm looking for? The affirmation that life is like continuing on. Like things happen, things come up that you still have to deal
Well,
with, when you're going through this type of
and I think the
experience.
big takeaway with there is it really just puts life and things in perspective. It was like,
Yeah.
I didn't
Oh
cry.
yeah.
I was just like, "I don't care. I can't deal with that right now. We need to go see Charlotte."
Yeah.
It was just kind of like really put it in perspective. I
Mm.
mean, any other time in my life, could you imagine? I thought I lost my wallet last week, and it was such a big ordeal. It's like, this was like
Yeah.
the only thing I have that I really cherish, and it was gone. And I was just like, can't deal with that. I have more important things. So it really does put it in perspective for
Oh,
you when someone is sick or when something like that is going on. it takes over. It trumps everything else, right?
Yeah, the important things are the people we have around us and how we feel when we're with them. And you got a crash course in that for sure. You could teach the class now.
It was such a perfect example of things don't matter and people at our loved ones do right off the bat. Yeah, going to meet Charlotte that first day was hard. You have no idea what you're going to walk into. And this is another time where my husband had gone that night after he stayed with me in that decision moment, and he had gone to see my daughter kind of when she was getting admitted. And I think about that all the time for him too, because I think that was a very traumatic experience for him, because anyone who has had a kid in the hospital or in the NICU, there are people everywhere. They are hooking up cords. It is the most organized chaos you've ever seen. But for somebody who hasn't seen that before, I think it was really hard. And a doctor pulled him over to the side and actually told him, your daughter's very sick. We don't know. We are going to do everything that we can for her. We're not sure what's going to happen. She may never play on a playground. He was kind of trying to manage his expectations. But I have to tell you, too, I think of that doctor every time she is doing the monkey bars and going down slides and swinging, and thinking she is playing on the playground. But so we went over to meet her that morning. All right, Scott had already met her. I was going for the first time. And it's like anticipation and anxiety, because for someone who's never been, I had delivered my babies in a hospital, and outside of that, I've never been in one, fortunately, and you just don't know what you don't know. So walking over there was nerve-wracking because you don't know what to expect. You don't know what she's going to look like. But when we got there, there were already doctors in the room, and they knew that she needed some immediate intervention to get her stable. But because she had this heart anomaly, they weren't exactly sure what she was going to be able to handle. Again, I'm sure a lot of your listeners know this, but they will not put you under anesthesia if they're not sure if your heart can handle it. So kind of right when we got there, they whisked us out into the hallway because they had to do some of the procedures bedside as opposed to surgical. So that's another one of those snapshots where you see her laying there, she's intubated, there's cords and there's beeping. And then it was one of the only times where they didn't want us to stay in the room. Normally they're pretty good about letting you stay if you want, but they wouldn't let us stay in. And I remember standing in the hospital with one of the nurses who became one of Charlotte's primary nurses, and will just always be near and dear to us. But she was just like, they do this, trying to talk us off the ledge. And you're just, again, you don't really fully grasp or understand the gravity of the situation until you think back to it now, and you're like, what were they doing? That should have been under anesthesia in a surgical suite. So it's that was kind of our first morning and experience there. And then they get her stable and you let her come back in, and it's bizarre. You're sitting in a room and you still don't really have a full understanding of what's going on. And part of the other complexity of those first few days is there's so many people. You're not only trying to meet your daughter, but you're trying to understand who all the different people are coming in and out of your room, which we've spent enough time in hospitals now that it's second nature. We know there's doctors and nurses and fellows and residents, but when that's new to you, it's a revolving door, and you're like, who are all these people? And there's several different specialties, urologists, neurologists, pediatric surgeons, cardiologists. So it's just really overwhelming. And it's like, can we just have a moment of quiet? but yeah, it was chaos, quite honestly, the first morning when we went over there. And then again, if I can indulge you in another tangent story, and then my mom and dad, who have just been the biggest support system in all of this. I mean, you have to have somebody at home watching the older two siblings, right? While Scott and I are at the hospital. My mom calls me that day and is like, Lyle has hand, foot, mouth. And I was like, oh gosh, no way. No. So I elected to stay in the hospital another day because, and this was even, this was pre-COVID, so we didn't even know what we know about germs now. But I was like, if I know that if I go home and get hand, foot, mouth, I can't come to the NICU to see her. So I stayed in the hospital an extra day. So it was chaos, in every sense of the
Oh my
word.
gosh. I'm just trying to picture you. I've, been on the other side of being in the NICU, and part of my role there was, to help those dads as they come over and try to identify who is who, because it just is, it's such a whirlwind. And then you're like, what does my baby look like? Wait, I can't even see her face because she has all of these monitors on, and this, she's intubated, and there's tape, and what color eyes does she have? And all of those moments that you're supposed to be able to have, and then you don't get to have right off the bat. Plus, just like physical pain that you're experiencing from your C-section too.
Right. Yeah, and we were so fortunate to have some amazing nurses, and we had Child Life in the Children's Hospital where my daughter was, and they were so good about, okay, we're going to change the tube and take the tape off, get your picture. So they were so aware of like, get that picture before we put the tape on, or all of those little things, which again are maybe some other listeners can relate to this because it's sort of a complicated feeling, but you become so close with, Charlotte spent 11 weeks in the NICU. So it was really almost to her due date exactly. But you become so close with a lot of these nurses, and the child life specialist who was in our NICU, who I still talk with today. And you're so thrilled when you leave, and you're like, I never want to be back here a day, but you really miss the people that you see every day, right? It's like you're almost sad to leave them, but you're like, get me out of here. But at the same time, it's you're so grateful for all amazing people that you build these relationships with, and who you are just grateful to on a level that you can't explain. It's like there are never enough words to express how grateful you are that there are people who do what you and nurses and doctors do. It's like,
well, we feel the gratitude for sure.
Good.
And, it's just, from our end, just, an honor to even be able to walk alongside families in that way. And so we have the same feeling, like you guys leave and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to really miss them, but at the same time, get out of here. Like you have more in front of you than coming to the hospital every day. And it's really bittersweet.
It is.
As you described for our end too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I know. I feel emotional too as you're talking. I can tell you are. It's the other thing is it's like this sacred space where these people know you intimately and know your health information, and they know what you're going through, and leaving that too is like, how am I going to explain this to somebody else? Like nobody else besides these people who have been in it with us really understand what we're going through. And that's when the whole community of, medical parenting and meeting other people who can share stories like these becomes so important, because it can feel isolating going back to your world, but there are other people out there.
I often say, you don't know what you haven't experienced, and I hope that no one else has to experience what we did. But it is different when you're talking to somebody who has gone through something similar, as opposed to some of my loved ones who want to understand, but they just, when you haven't gone through it, you can't know what you haven't experienced. So it is. It's some of the staff and people that have gone through it, they're with you at some of the most difficult moments of your entire life. We had a 3 a.m. emergency surgery for Charlotte while she was in the NICU, and the nurse and doctor that were there that night they will always be some of the most memorable people. And I still talk to one of them, the nurses, today. So it's like, I tell her all the time, I'm like, I'm so glad it was you that was there that night. Yeah, it's just people are with you in the hardest moments. So it's like a connection and a bond that you can't really explain.
Well, I know Charlotte, she was discharged at 11 weeks and went on to have, surgeries, and you guys still see your specialist. But how did you handle the stress of kind of now being a medical parent and then parenting 2 other kids and kind of getting thrown into that world? How did you cope?
Yeah. I think kind of what we mentioned earlier, you really go into fight or flight mode. But for us, it was just so important to have a support system around us. I mean, we were so fortunate that my parents and my father-in-law were really around and helped us through a lot of that. I mean, they took care of our older kids. They did laundry. We had so many friends dropping off meals. I am someone who's always had a hard time in life accepting help. And something that this experience has taught me is that you have to accept help and that people want to and are willing to give it. So we kind of had a strong support system that way. We had employers who were incredibly understanding and willing to work with us and give us free time. But you kind of just kick in that mode of like, we are going to get through this, and you settle into a routine. You know, like I would go to the NICU during the day, and Scott would go kind of afternoon and evening hours, and then we would leave her alone for a few hours at night to sleep, and then kind of just like do it all again. And again, my mom would have schedules at home with like where the kids needed to be and who was covering which days, and we had a ton of help with all the logistics so that we could really focus on Charlotte and be present in the NICU. Because something else that is funny that I think people might not understand is you never know when a doctor is going to pop in. And it's like, if you miss them,
Right.
you might not get the information that you want, or you can get it, but it's hard, or it's not in person. So we really we knew we wanted to be there during rounds, but then we knew that a doctor might pop in at 4:00 after they're done with surgeries to like update you. And if you're not there, they can call you and everything else. But we were really lucky that we were able to be there. But there's also a lot of downtime in between, right? When the baby is sleeping and hooked up to monitors. So we really since we didn't know that she was what her diagnosis was before, we spent a lot of time researching, and you're trying to learn as fast as you can. And the doctors always love that. You know, they're like, what did you Google? But you're like, that's the only way. Yeah. It was the only way we know how to really start to digest. You know, I said when the doctor was sitting on my bed and giving me the information, you're just overwhelmed and you can't process it. So that was really how we kind of started to process. Here's what she has, and here's what we're going to do about it. So we did a lot of research, and something that I've learned through all of this is that there is an expert out there in everything. So we were fortunate to be at such an amazing children's hospital, but there is a pediatric surgeon who is completely dedicated to what Charlotte has. So finding that person and talking to them, they're out there. And I feel like that was such a game changer for us because what she has is incredibly rare. It's like 1 in 50,000. So for us to be able to find an expert that like truly knew everything there was to know about her diagnosis was huge. And that was just from researching and asking questions. We did get set up with a family who had the same diagnosis, and it was incredibly helpful to talk to that family. And, you know, something else that we had that really helped us in those early days was there's a charity organization that provides care coordination for medically complex babies. And it's a personally dedicated nurse. They have several babies on their caseload, but it's a nurse that is really dedicated to organizing your care across specialties. And that was like
That sounds amazing. What is the name of this organization?
It's called Little Heroes League.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that has been really interesting about this process for us is that you have all these friends and family that want to help you, but there's just not always something that they can do. But some of the charity organizations were just things that helped us more than, and we're so grateful for them. And one of them was this care coordination. So they would help us organize appointments. They would go to appointments with us so that when we, you know, didn't know what questions to ask, or we forgot what they said, or that situation I was talking about earlier where you kind of forget and kind of black out.
Right.
They were there to help us through all of that. They could get us medical supplies. We could call them when we had questions. So the great part about that is it helped us deal with being overwhelmed when we got home. And then it also allowed us to spend time with Charlotte and spend time with our boys instead of being bogged down on a lot of those logistics that I know is just so overwhelming when you get home from the hospital. Um, so those,
That is an amazing service. Like yeah, that needs to be replicated
yes.
in every
So
city across the US, actually across the world.
that's their goal. It started in Chicago, and they are now in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they're in Iowa. And they said we are not going to stop until we're in every hospital. And it truly,
I love it.
yeah. So for us, it was mostly getting as much information as we could because again, we didn't have that before Charlotte was born. So it was getting all of the information, going into that fight mode, preparing, making sure things were normal for the boys at home. But it took a lot of people and a lot of energy, and it's exhausting. but
Yeah.
It's just,
Well, it goes to show that like when you have a whole like nonprofit organization that exists for this exact reason, that it's a really big job that you absolutely need support with. As Charlotte has gotten older and, kind of that really like, what's the word I'm looking for? That moment in that trauma of everything being rushed and right on top of each other, and you have time to kind of soak in and watch her grow. What have been some of the most positive or unexpected moments that you've had since caring for a child that has, different medical complexities?
yeah. I think every time a child with a medical complexity hits a milestone, whether it be walking or her birthday every year hits differently than my other children's do. Anytime there's a milestone or a big event, her first day of preschool, it just hits a little bit different because everything, all of the people and all of the time and all of the things that you've gone through to get her there, if that makes sense. So I think anytime that she hits a milestone or there's something to celebrate, it just feels bigger. And then I think one of the biggest surprises about having a child with medical complexities and what it's taught me is that I think I've always been a really compassionate person, but I think I have so much empathy now for anybody going through anything. And I think it has made me so much more aware of all these charity organizations and how much they really can help people. So I think that it's really, really channeled my energy into doing everything I can to help people in similar situations and be philanthropic when I can because it matters. And it's been kind of a surprise, but also a very welcome surprise.
You're not the first person to say that like one of the biggest things is just this empathy and compassion that watches over you that you may not have ever had before, which can end up, helping you in every facet of your life, every relationship, every, sales clerk that you meet in the store. Like just that human connection is kind of forever changed because, you have this different perspective.
Every story you hear, you can just feel it to your core in a way that I don't know that I did before. But yes, very much.
And then last but not least, because you have written this wonderful book, which is, you sent a book and I like fell in love with it. I mean, that doesn't happen that often. I have, just love getting these books that parents and families send. And it's one of my favorite parts of this podcast is having the honor to get to read first what the amazing creations that you have and that are really born from such a place of empathy and teaching respect and differences. It's just, I think medical parents make the best books. So if you have a hankering to do that, I think this is your sign to write a book. If you're listening. But tell us, what has Charlotte taught you since you became her mom? What has she taught you about yourself that you didn't know before?
Wow. I think kids are so resilient, right? And I think two things come to mind. I think, again, it is cliche, but like, you really don't know what you're capable of until you're put in a situation where you have to do it, right? I don't like blood. I don't like, I'm like, I could have never been a doctor. So it really is true that because they are so amazing and they go through so much, you really rise to the level to meet them there. And it's true, again, it's cliche, but you really don't know what you're capable of doing until you have to. So some of the medical procedures that we do with her at home, I can't believe they don't make me squirmish, but you're just able to get through it. And you're so inspired by them. I mean, they're dealt such a rough hand. I mean, they didn't do anything to deserve the hardships that they're handed, right? So it's just like, as we said, the compassion, and you want to be able to do whatever you can to help them and make life easier for them. So I think that's one thing that I've learned, like, there's a way to get most things done. It's just how do you do it, and who do you have to ask for help, which is something I mentioned I'm not great at. So I think she has taught me that, for sure.
Yeah, that makes complete sense on a lot of different levels. And she also taught you, right, that you have this within you to not only make sure that she feels comfortable and grows up feeling really confident about her scars and her story, but that other kids did too. And that's that empathy that has kind of trickled in. And it's, from my perspective, like, I'm very thankful for Charlotte and all that she has done because of what you are bringing to the world. So tell us a little bit about the book that you wrote and how people can find it and get access to it.
Yeah. Okay. So after we kind of got through all of Charlotte's 6 surgeries, and we got in a place during COVID where things were a little bit quieter medically, I started thinking about, as she was getting older, how she was going to think about all these scars that each surgery has left, and how we're going to talk about it with her, and how she's going to feel about it as she starts to get a little bit older. And the first thing I do as a parent is kind of Google what books are out there, and I just couldn't find exactly what I was looking for to kick off the conversation with her. And so I started jotting down some ideas, really just for Charlotte. I was like, here's some things that I can talk about with her. And I was a teacher before my oldest was born. And so I think that books have always been something that I look for and lean on and love children's books. And so I kind of started writing it down in a story pattern for her. And my husband was like, you should really do something with this. And so I did. I wrote down some ideas, and a year and a half we had a book in hand. But it was really important to me when I was writing the book that it was something, it's about scars for her, but like each child out there has their own. The book is called My Scars, My Brave Adventure. So for her, her brave adventure includes scars, but every kid has difficulties or traumas that they go through. So it was important to me that kids be able to reflect and say, hey, I've been through some hard things too, and how can I talk to people about that? Because I think also all too often we're in situations where we might say, hey, that person has a scar or walks with crutches or whatever it might be. And as adults, our intuition is to go, shh, like, let's not talk about that. So I wanted it to very much be like, we can talk about these things. We can kind of own the narrative around how we talk about our differences. And I wanted that for her, but I also wanted that for her brothers, right? Like, they're going to see people who are different, or they're going to have people who might ask them about their sister and like what her medical complexities are. So I just really wanted all kids to be able to have this story that they could look at and say, yeah, we all have a brave adventure. It's all different. Let's talk about that. And that's okay. So that's
I sent you a picture of my favorite quote in the book, and it says, each of us has a story. We're unique, one of a kind. Your story may be in your head or on your skin like mine. I mean, that just stopped me in my tracks, because I have a 4 and 7-year-old at home too, and it's really easy to see somebody's physical differences. But like you said, we all have those stories on the inside, and especially siblings, right? They have their own story and experience of what it's like to be a medical sibling. So you thought of so many things, and where is it available and where can people buy it?
You can get it on my website, which is katygreenauthor.com, or Amazon.
Awesome. That's perfect. We will link to both of those things. And is there anywhere that you would want folks to follow you on social media or anything like that, or should they just check out your website?
Yeah, definitely check out my website, or you can also find me on Instagram at katygreen_author.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And I've so enjoyed talking to you. And I just really appreciate you being here.
No, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun, and we could have talked for 4 hours.
We probably could have. But thankful our listeners are like, okay, guys, we get it. You really like each other now. You could keep talking.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
No,
thanks.
I also would just love to say, if anybody out there, I'm always open to questions, or if people want to talk or commiserate. I'm open to that. So
that's
you
so
can find
generous.
me.
Yes. Okay. So find her on Instagram and then her website as well. All right. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for joining us on the Child Life On Call podcast. The only reason this podcast keeps on going is because of you and listeners like you. So please join in on the conversation with us on Instagram, Facebook. I'm even on TikTok now, y'all, making a fool of myself. I haven't danced yet, but maybe it's coming. You can find us at Child Life On Call. We also have a website, and that has all of our information about the Child Life Circle, about the Child Life On Call app, and a blog with new information all the time. That's childlifeoncall.com. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for listening to these episodes and being a part of this community. We are so grateful and so honored to be able to provide this for you.